concern. It's difficult for me to understand why. It's hard for me to imagine any litigant. We're talking here generally about civil litigation. Any litigant with as much bargaining power as the United States government has in court. And when you bring that power to bear by directing someone to pay to a third party, you're almost inevitably going to run up against a risk of that being improper. I mean, in many more circumstances appearing at least to be improper. Very often these end up going to groups that have certain sympathies that might align with the incumbent administration and their views. And this further perpetuates this sue and settle dynamic, the process by which lawsuits are brought, sometimes friendly lawsuits, friendly to the Attorney General and the President currently in power. They'll then agree to a settlement agreement and then agree that the litigant has to pay a whole bunch of money to this third party. It's difficult for me to imagine why that would ever be appropriate, and I would encourage you not to allow that and to follow the previous administration's ban on it. Ms. Gupta, about 3 years ago, Ms. Gupta, about 3 years ago, I think it was in February of 2018, you authored an 8-page letter that you submitted to this committee in opposition to the nominee.
Thanks so much to all our people watching here around the country and around the world here. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thank you so much again for joining us here on News Now from Fox. We already have a live event that we are going to right now. Governor Andrew Cuomo making an announcement right now. Let's listen.
All sorts of records, attendance records. It's revitalized the entire region. I want to congratulate everyone who's been associated with the fair, but I want to give a special thank you and shout out to Troy Waffner, who's done a great job. Let's give Troy a round of applause. And now, this site, State Fairgrounds, great recreation area, great attraction, it has transformed itself to where this site is today the second largest mass vaccination site in the United States of America. It did 9,500 vaccinations in the past 24 hours, second only to Javits Center. Isn't that amazing? Give the whole group and the National Guard a round of applause for what you're doing here. I want to welcome some special guests who are with us today. You're going to hear from Anne Marie Talercio in a moment, right after me. Then you're going to hear from who represents the AFL-CIO, as you know. Then you're going to hear from Fanny Villarreal, who represents the YWCA. And then you're going to hear from Pastor Draper, who is going to speak on behalf of all the pastors who are here and the faith-based community that is working in partnership with this organization. I also want to recognize a special member of our society for many, many years, a great, great leader, Van Robinson. Let's give him a round of applause. We also have Paul Dickens with us from the CSEA, and I thank him. Look, where we are now in this long journey of this past year, we are now coming down to the end. Are we at the end? No. That's why we have to stay smart, we have to stay safe, masks, etc. But we're at the beginning of the end. And the end is the vaccine. The vaccine is the weapon that wins the war. We know that. It's been tested. It's been proven. Now, you have to make the weapon, and that's taking time. Biden administration, God bless them, has increased the number of vaccine distribution. They've moved it up, so we're going to have many more vaccines faster, and that's good news. But you have to make the vaccine, you have to distribute the vaccine, which is a massive governmental operation. Nobody's ever had to mobilize like this in this short a period of time. It's what today's center is all about. And then third, you have to get people to accept it. You can have the vaccine, you can have the distribution center, but until that needle is in an arm, it doesn't mean anything. Now, the supply of the vaccine is dependent on the federal government. And that ebbs and flows. Why? Because when the Biden administration came in, they didn't have enough vaccine for the country. They just had not bought enough vaccine. President Biden comes in, opens the vaccine cupboard, the cupboard is bare. They have scrambled and they have secured more vaccine, but it's uneven. So we got a big dosage of Johnson & Johnson, one shot, great. We got that last week. But then it's going to trail off for a couple of weeks, and then it's going to increase again, the supply. So you're going to see an unevenness to the vaccine. Everybody says, I want the vaccine, why can't I get it? Because there's not enough vaccine. That's the simple answer. And you are going to see this ebb and flow in the supply from the federal government. That's a fact. We're going to have to deal with it. It's going to be still an annoying few months, but we're getting there. But the supply is increasing. If the supply is increasing, we can then increase our distribution levels. And I'm very pleased to say today that our first level was 65 years old plus, right? Because COVID affects older people more. So our initial threshold was essential workers, nursing homes, 65 plus. We're going to drop the 65-year-old plus to 60-year-old plus, and that's going to start tomorrow. So now 60-year-old, 60-year-old plus are going to be available. They can start making appointments tomorrow. They can make them at the mass vaccination sites. They can make them at pharmacies, but that will start 8 a.m. tomorrow. 60 plus, that means people like as old as I am now will be available, eligible for the vaccine. Second, all sites starting March 17th, next Wednesday, all sites, county sites, FQHC sites, mass vaccination sites, we have thousands of distribution sites. All sites, to simplify the situation, can vaccinate anyone who is eligible, all right? So whether you're going to a county-run site, a city-run site, what they call an FQHC, every site can vaccinate anyone who is eligible, with one exception. Pharmacies still will only be doing 60 plus and teachers. 60 plus and teachers. Why? Because the pharmacies, it's not as easy for them to identify different types of workers, et cetera. They can identify age, because age you can identify by just the driver's license. And President Biden, rightfully so, has made teachers a priority. So pharmacies will do 60 plus, and teachers, we want to get those schools open. Every other site will be doing every other person who is eligible. Also on March 17th, next Wednesday, the public-facing public employees will also be eligible. Not-for-profit public-facing emergency employees and employees who are providing necessary services like the YWCA, they will also be available. Essential public workers will also be available. Public-facing building workers will also be available. These are the people who are the everyday heroes, who are out there doing their job. They're putting themselves in a possible position of exposure. They are essential for us to continue operating. They're going to become eligible on March 17th. Let's give them a round of applause. Last point is the distribution is working. It's going out. It's going out fast, not as fast as we would like, but as fast as the supply allows. It also has to be fair. It has to be fair. And we've talked about this from day one. COVID discriminates. COVID discriminates by race. They say the virus is race blind. Yes and no. It will infect anyone. But by circumstance, it infected blacks and Hispanics more than whites. Twice as many black people died from COVID as white people. Twice as many black people died from COVID as white people. Just think about that. 1.5 times as many Hispanic people died from COVID as white people. Just think about that. COVID discriminates. Black population had less access to health care. Hispanic population had less access to health care. Black Hispanic population had more comorbidities, more underlying conditions. That's why COVID preyed on blacks and Hispanics more than they did the white population. So when it comes to the vaccine, it is very important that we correct that injustice and we make sure that we have access to everyone. You take Central New York, 87% of the population is white. 94% of the people who received the vaccine are white. 87% of the population, 94% of the vaccine. Black population, 11%, only 5% of the vaccine. Hispanic population, 4%, only 2% of those who have been vaccinated. Asian population, 3%, only 2% of those who have been vaccinated. So, we need to increase the vaccination number for the black, Hispanic, and Asian population. One of the reasons the pastors are here today is to say, look, we understand there's a hesitancy issue. I don't like the word hesitancy because it's a muddled word. There's a trust issue. Black community has less trust of the system. Oh, how can you say that? It's true. It's true. Tuskegee experiment, they have less trust of the system. Well, the Trump administration said it's safe. I don't believe the Trump administration, says the black community. By the way, I don't believe the Trump administration, says me, Andrew Cuomo. We had a New York State panel that also reviewed it. We've done 6 million dosages. It's worked. Top black professionals, medical professionals in the United States say take it. I've recommended it to my mother who has taken it. I'm going to recommend it to my daughters who have taken it. I am going to make an appointment. I am going to take it. The pastors who are here today are saying take it. There is no reason why anyone would be recommending this vaccine unless they believed it saved lives and has proof that it saves lives. We want to stop this virus. We have to stop the virus. You know how you win a war? You go out and you win the war. You go out and you defeat the enemy. The enemy doesn't defeat themselves. No war does the enemy defeat themselves. All the training that the National Guard receives, the Army receives. Nobody ever says, wait for the enemy to destroy themselves. Go out there and crush them. You know how you crush them? You crush them with this vaccine. But we have to take it. And then let's get back to work. Let's rebuild this economy. Let's rebuild this state. Let's get our lives back to normal. Let's get children back in school. Let's get paychecks back in homes. Let's get normal society functioning again. This vaccine is the ticket. We just have to make it happen. Thank you and God bless you.
Well, before I start, I'm Anne-Marie Talercio, and I'm the proud representative of my union brothers and sisters in Central New York. I represent the Central New York Area Labor Federation, AFL-CIO. And I have written remarks because I didn't want to forget one word. But before I...
All right, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox. We should also point out that this is closed to reporters there in Syracuse, so it doesn't look like we'll be getting any questions about the very latest sexual harassment allegations against the governor. Well, let's take that quick 2-minute break.
But when I heard that New York State had the professionals, we're talking with worldwide professionals, but the council that sits somewhere, I don't know where you sit, Albany, wherever, I know you were looking at that vaccine. So I knew, and I did take it. I don't want to say why. You know, these ages creep up on you. But I happen to be in one of those age groups. And I took it. I feel so much freer now that I took it. And I wear my mask, but thank you, Governor, for always having our back. That's so important to all of us. As we know, you have our back. I know, I live with a military veteran. So thank you, Governor, and it's always an honor to be with you, especially when you bring good news about more vaccine. But then again, you know, I was thinking these words over. When doesn't he come with good news? It's usually about a better state fair. It's usually about economic development. And today it's about a vaccine, which is really the lifeblood, is what we need to go forward. This is what's going to get everything back moving again. And I represent workers who have been out for a year. They're with the hotel and restaurant workers. That's my actual job. And they're never going to go back to work unless we have this vaccine. So besides my brothers and sisters of my union, we have this union men and women of Central New York to thank, because they are the essential workers. They are the community. When you say the community, it's union brothers and sisters who go out and do the work every day, regardless of what's going on. And thank you to CSEA, because you can't Zoom garbage collection. You can't Zoom snow plowing. And we all know we really need snow plowing in Central New York. That's a done deal. We'd go nowhere without our snow plows. We like to say we can now buy food online, but not everybody has computer access. The retail clerks in the supermarkets, these were the frontline workers that went out every day, and they risked their lives. But now, with the advent of more vaccine and a governor who watches our back about these things, we got that vaccine all through this difficult year. When it was available, we got it first. And now they're going to be able to go to work and do their job with the security that they have the vaccine. So for all of them, I thank you, and their families. Because we all know what it's like to go to work and not really know if you're coming home. And if you have to worry about not having a vaccine, but now you don't, it's there. You just have to go get it. It is welcome news, and it brings really security and relief to all our workers here to get our economy going again. It's a quick act, you just go. We have wonderful caretakers that give us the shot. You get it, you go home, you rest a little, and for the most part, you're fine and you can go to work the next day. We have 3 vaccines. They are all safe. They're all available, or as they become available, just make that appointment and get a shot. We have the Pfizer, we have Moderna, and we have Johnson & Johnson. And I've spoken to a lot of people, symptoms, some people get them. You know, you have to be careful if you're the one who gets them, but seems to be all over the board. Some get them, most don't get them. And I've spoken to the nurses who give the shots and who work up at the hospital. They said it's just, you know, you just have to be careful. So I want to thank the governor for today's announcement. Your efforts have saved lives. And another thing I've said, if it wasn't for your leadership since March, maybe just about a year ago, I believe Central New York would have been ravaged. That virus would have worked, it would have got off a plane in Syracuse. It may have gotten off in LaGuardia, but it would have gotten back on and gotten off in Syracuse. And I think a lot of us are here today because of your quick action. And I mean this. I mean this. Thank you. I don't know what else to say. Thank you. Oh, I was supposed to take my mask off. Did you hear me?
I did. Thank you, Governor. I am glad to stand here with you today to join this announcement. Thank you very much. I would like to acknowledge some of our friends that are here. Linda Brown Robinson, the immediate past president of Syracuse and Onondaga. My dear friend, right there, Ben Robinson. Superintendent Nebraska Carter, the Living Water. Where's he at? Wendy Colucci, the field coordinator of Central New York Area Labor Federation. Welcome. Paul Dickens, United President, CSEA, Onondaga County. Walt Dixie, Executive Director of Jubilee Homes. Where is it? Hello. Elisa Morales, Executive Director, Spanish Action League. Gwendolyn Walk, Syracuse Onondaga, NAACP. Gwendolyn. Michael Nessie, Labor Relations Specialist, CSEA Local 1000. John Snake, Political Action Coordinator for the CSEA. Anne-Marie Talercio, the President of Central New York Area Labor Federation. Pastor Derek Naher, Moderator of Northeastern Jurisdiction of NBC. Dr. Amy Tucker, my colleague and chair of the Central New York Hub Regional Equity Task Force. Thank you very much. Good morning. I am Fanny Villarreal, the YWCA Executive Director and Central New York Ambassador for the State Health Equity Task Force. Last year has been hard on many people and groups, including the not-for-profits. It is hard to run a not-for-profit even in normal times. The COVID crisis has just made this far worse. Still, not-for-profits like the YWCA have remained New York top. I agree with the governor that the vaccine is what ends this suffering. I have been proud to join in his efforts to make sure the vaccine is fairly distributed. Today, he's once again delivered on his mission. Opening eligible to not-for-profit workers on the front lines will allow hardworking organizations across the state to do what we do best. We need these workers vaccinated to bring vital services, programming, and other supports to our communities, especially here in Central New York. I got the vaccine and I can tell you it's safe. After a year of constant uncertainty, I can tell you how much relief it brought to me. I did it because I love my family and I love my community. And now with the same love, it is my mission to educate about the importance of the vaccine. With 3 vaccines now available, more of us will be able to feel the same security it brings. I urge everyone who is now eligible to do the same. It is time we get back to our life, to pick up the pieces of last year and get back to the necessary work of rebuilding our community. Thank you again, Governor Cuomo. This is another step in the effort to end the crisis once and for all. God bless you. Thank you.
Let the church say amen. Amen. Oh, that just feels right that I'm up here. Certainly we thank you, Governor Cuomo, for gathering us here today. And I speak on behalf of my colleagues that share with us, and thank you for your leadership, especially on the issue of distributing the vaccine. If I can recognize the clergy that are here with us today, I am Reverend Ricardo Draper, the senior pastor of the Tucker Missionary Baptist Church here in the city of Syracuse. We have Pastor H. Bernard Alex, the senior pastor of the Victory Temple Baptist Church, Pastor Sharon Bow, Hope Chapel AME Zion Church in Utica, Pastor Darren Dewson, Leap of Faith Outreach Ministry, Pastor Derek Galloway, founder and senior pastor of the Connected Christian Church, Pastor Darren C. Jaime, the pastor of the People's AME Zion Church, Pastor James Jones, Praise Temple, Church of God in Christ. We have Pastor Sean Robertson, pastor of the Southern Missionary Baptist Church, Pastor Derek Tannehill, who serves as the pastor of the Pentecost Evangelical Baptist Church, as well as the moderator of the Northeastern Baptist District Association, Pastor Phil Turner, the pastor of the Bethany Baptist Church, Elder Wallace Barkins Sr., Brotherly Love, Church of God in Christ, and Elder Wallace Barkins Jr., Brotherly Love, Church of God in Christ. Thank you all for sharing with us today. We know that this shot is what ends the suffering that COVID has brought to our African American, or shall we say black and brown communities. There are those of us that may be standing here who survived COVID. You're looking at a COVID survivor. And so the vaccine plays a very important role as we try to curtail and curb COVID-19. We want to say to you today, Mr. Governor, thank you not only for your leadership in the state of New York, but in our nation. It was you who was a trailblazer for us in the midst of uncertain and uncanny and unscrupulous leadership. We thank you that you rose to the occasion, and New York was a trailblazer for other states as we fought COVID-19. I'm reminded today of what Paul says to his son in ministry, Timotheus. He says, I fought a good fight, I finished the race, and I've kept the faith. We indeed, Governor Cuomo, you have led us to the end of this race, and we now have 3 vaccines. There's still a lot of fight ahead. However, we need to get this vaccine into the arms as many people as possible. Now, I say this, that a lot of us think that getting the vaccine is responsible, but I flip it and say the vaccine is important for those who are irresponsible, for those who won't wear masks, for those who won't social distance, for those who will not think about the families of others, for those of us that stand here today as clergy. A lot of us have had to stand and commit bodies to the ground because of COVID-19. And so now that we have this vaccine, I heard one of the prior speakers say about the symptoms or the side effects. I said to my congregation, I would rather have a side effect than have to go to the cemetery. Today's announcement helps us do just that. More vaccines are on the way, and again, we want to thank the governor and his team for continuing to work with the houses of worship to deliver the vaccine directly to the communities that need it. Our efforts have been made better with the approval of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and it actually works a lot better for some people because it's one shot. And for those who are homeless and those who may not have the transportation to get both shots, this Johnson & Johnson shot will help us get those people who are in the underserved and underprivileged communities vaccinated. So now we can open this up to more New Yorkers, which will allow us to end this suffering for over the last year. I shared with the young ladies who stood with us that for the first time in my life, I've never been able to go to church on Easter Sunday, or my members were not able to come, or they were not able to attend on Mother's Day. For the first time, people were not able to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries with family members. And so we understand in the African American community that there's a lot of mistrust. And part of that is, Mr. Governor, is because a lot of us in the African American community has Southern roots. We have Southern roots, and we understand what happened with the Tuskegee experiment. Matter of fact, we have a Tuskegee alum with us. Dr. H. Bernard Alex is a proud alum of Tuskegee University. But we say that we trust Dr. Fauci, and we trust Dr. Zucker, and locally we trust Dr. Gupta. I even trust Dr. Gupta on CNN because it's important to us that we get back to our way of life. And the only way to get back to this way of life is that we must encourage the vaccine. And my prayer is that if you're not going to take the vaccine, please don't talk other people against it. Is that you make it, let it be a personal decision. Again, we say thank you, Governor Cuomo and your team, for leading us through a dark and dismal period. But we thank you that you stood tall, you stood strong, and we want you to know that we appreciate your leadership and loyalty to the state of New York. Now, I wouldn't be a preacher unless I left here with something, and I want you to be encouraged by this, Mr. Governor. The Bible declares, now unto him who was able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all we can ask or think.
Beautiful words. Let's give the Reverend another round of applause. Beautiful, Reverend. Let's give Fanny a round of applause. Anne Marie. Okay, let's sum it up. Number one, 60-year-olds are eligible starting tomorrow. Making appointments starting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Remember, it's still uneven. We still don't have enough supply, but do your best. I know it requires patience, but 60-year-olds start tomorrow. Next week, March 17th, all sites, county sites, all sites can administer vaccines to any eligible population, except pharmacies. Pharmacies will only be doing 60+ and teachers. Also, next Wednesday, March 17th, the everyday heroes, the essential workers, YWCA, public employees, etc., will be eligible for the vaccine. We're going to go to work. I'm going back. I'm getting on the phone, talking to the White House. You know what I'm going to ask the White House for? 2 words: more vaccine. Let's go to work. Thank you very much.
All right, Governor Andrew Cuomo there, taking no questions. And why is that? Well, because there was no reporters there in the room and no reporters on the phone line as well. That event was closed to the press, and he just wanted to make that statement on the vaccines. And now 60-year-olds will be able to get the vaccine starting tomorrow there in New York, but he did not want to make any more statements on those growing allegations of sexual harassment as New York Republicans are starting the process for impeachment proceedings against the governor. Let's take a quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox Live. Look at the White House. Soon we're going to have an event from President Biden. He's going to be visiting a small business in the D.C. area that got some help because of the Payment Protection Act that was going on in D.C., as well as the COVID-19 relief talks. So we'll have that. And when we come back on the other side of the break, we'll go back out to Minnesota, where the jury selection continues. It's going to be about 2 to 3 weeks here. So we'll be going in and out of that through the rest of the way here. You're watching News Now from Fox.
Analysis, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. The last question I have about this page, it was local police departments try to cover up excessive force rather than correct it, and you somewhat agreed with that. Can you explain your thinking there?
I'm not sure that I can. At the time that I filled out the questionnaire, I was still following news. And since then I haven't, and it's been a few months. So maybe, today I would have to revise that to no opinion, but yeah, I can't speak to what I was thinking at the time I filled that out.
I mean, was there something specific in the news at that time that made you think of, can you think of what was in the news that made you think that police departments cover up excessive force claims?
I can't recall. I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Fair enough. You also indicated that your fiance has some medical training. She's a physical therapist.
Yes.
And so kind of along those same line of questions that we were talking about earlier, let's say you're listening to some expert testimony here in this case, and they're talking about restraints or various medical things involving asphyxia, okay? Would you rely on the evidence you hear in court, or would you go home and say, honey, this is what we're talking about, what do you think? And get information from her?
I'd rely on what I hear in court.
There were two questions in the questionnaire that I'd like you to expand on a little more, about Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. With respect to Black Lives Matter, you indicated that you viewed that organization in a somewhat favorable light. And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you indicated that it was somewhat unfavorable, in your opinion.
Could I get a clarification? So Black Lives Matter, does it specifically say organization in there? Because if that's the case, I'd change my answer.
It doesn't specifically say in the question, but your response was, I don't love, underlying the organization itself, parenthetical to extreme.
Yeah, well, sorry, that was louder. Yeah, I don't love the Black Lives Matter organization. I do support the movement, or at least this is, I want to make sure because this is nuanced, but I support that, the message that every life should matter equally. I don't believe that the organization Black Lives Matter necessarily stands for that. I do think that the phrase and the movement stand for that.
Okay, and that's you have a favorable response to that, right?
Yes, I think all lives matter equally.
Okay, and you indicate that you kind of see Blue Lives Matter as a counter to the Black Lives Matter. Can you expand on that?
I think that I don't really see it as a counter, and that's why I think I see it as unfavorable, because I don't see the two as mutually exclusive. I don't see why the counter to Black lives should matter the same as all lives would be police lives matter too, because in my opinion, the whole point of that is all lives should matter equally, and that should include police.
Do you think that the two, you indicated you don't think that the two are mutually exclusive, so in other words, both and, right?
I suppose, sure.
There's a question about, in the questionnaire, about evaluating graphic photographs or video, and you wrote, I could handle it, but due to the weight of the jury process, I'm willing to be made uncomfortable. Can you just explain that a little broader?
Yeah, I mean, I don't go out of my way to watch or look at graphic things, but again, when I'm summoned for jury duty, whether it would be this case or another case, I think I value the importance of that duty over my personal comfort.
Right. So the last question in the questionnaire is about whether you want to serve as a juror in this case. You checked yes, and then with an explanation, why do you feel, and I liked your response that you feel that serving on a jury is a civic duty, you want to contribute, and you think you'd be good and fair and impartial, which I'm getting that sense. So let me ask you that same question in a slightly different way, if that's okay. There are some people who respond to the jury process in an effort to intentionally get themselves off of the jury. And there are other people who respond to jury questionnaires or jury questions in such a way to intentionally get on the jury, right? Because they have some particular belief or cause. Would you describe yourself as either of those?
My answers were truthful. That's how I would describe my answers.
Fair enough. Your Honor, if I may have just a moment to confer.
And with that, folks, we will be taking a quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox.
Mr. Slisher, it's getting close to our morning break. How long do you think? Should we take it now, or?
Let's go now, Your Honor. I won't be too long.
You would like to examine now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Juror number 2, you described your work and training in science as a passion. Can you please expound on that a little bit?
Sure. I guess I've always felt I had kind of an analytical mind. I excelled in science classes, math classes when I was younger, and kind of always viewed life through that lens, I guess you could say. I think integrity I guess that's the word, is integrity is important, and it's easy for me to use that value or apply that value to my work, which is something that I like.
And did you say that your background is in environmental studies, or that's your degree?
My degree is environmental studies and chemistry. It's a combined degree.
All right. And tell me how you use your environmental studies degree in your current job, or if you do.
I do, yeah. I work in a laboratory that does environmental sample analysis. I'm not sure how specific I should be, but I guess it doesn't matter, right?
Don't name the employer, but just tell me what your day-to-day job is like without
Sure.
disclosing who you work for or exactly.
Yeah, that's fine. I receive samples that have been shipped into the company, and I test them for a wide slate of contaminants that are either environmentally concerning or dangerous to worker hygiene. And I also do, the company I work for produces products, and I do specific testing on them to make sure that they won't be harmful to the environment.
And so as a person who tests products on behalf of an employer who makes such products, sometimes I'm assuming you get a test result that could go one way and one that could go another. Is that right?
Sure.
And, day. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about the camp that you worked for as a counselor? I was interested in hearing that.
Sure. Yeah, it was a summer camp through my childhood synagogue in a western suburb. I worked there for like 7 or 8 years, 7 summers. Started as a counselor, worked as an advocate, working one-on-one with campers that needed additional help. And then worked as a senior staff member designing programming.
Yeah. What age children are you working with?
It was K through 6.
You also mentioned that you and your fiance were interested in moving to the area of 38th and Chicago, or at least that neighborhood, is that right?
Neighborhoods in that region. It was a broad search.
Okay. Can you just describe what interested you in that particular area or those neighborhoods?
We were looking mostly in near the lakes down there, Lake Nokomis, Lake Hiawatha, just because we're active and wanted to be near, the creek, wanted to be near the lake, somewhere we could bike, walk our dog, and they had a good sense of community there, which was important to us.
You described yourself as enjoying outdoor activities, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you please expound on that a little bit? What kind of activities are you interested in?
I play ultimate frisbee in the summers. I go backpacking and hiking probably between 5 and 10 times a year, depending on the weather and the pandemic. That's the gist of it. We do a lot of biking around the city when we have the chance to in the summer.
Speaking of the pandemic, you see that we've taken some steps here to ensure social distancing and masking requirements and whatnot. Do you feel comfortable with the precautions that have been taken here?
Yes.
Do you think they're appropriate?
Yes, sure.
Given the pandemic?
Yeah, I think safety should be important for everybody involved here. Sure.
I appreciate you answering my questions today. Thank you very much.
Pass for cause? All right. Okay, juror number 2. You will be on this jury. And so we're going to have you return on March 29th at 9 a.m. because we're not going to start evidence or anything else. Again, you're not an investigator. Do not go and investigate. Try and avoid all media coverage of this case. And if there's any change in the schedule, as you've already noticed from yesterday and today, some things happen. But we're pretty confident that we'll be able to start March 29th at 9 a.m. And so I would ask you to report at 9 a.m. Make sure you're up here by 9 a.m. And you'll be taken to the appropriate, back to the courtroom that you were lounging in, and then we will call you in when the appropriate time is ready. Do you have any questions about that?
I'm not sure if you're able to answer this question.
I'll tell you if I can.
Yeah. What kind of information am I able to disclose to, say, my employer?
What you should tell them is that you have been selected as a juror on a criminal case, and that the anticipated time that you will need that week and the following 3 weeks, so 4 weeks total.
Okay.
And that's what you should tell them.
All right, thank you.
All right, with that, I would ask that you leave the yellow lanyard with the card on the witness stand.
Okay.
But make sure you keep your letter.
He needs a lanyard too. He has to keep the lanyard.
We changed it.
Okay.
We're changing things on the fly. We're going to keep the lanyard. You're going to be reissued it when you come in on March 29th.
Okay.
But the one thing you do have to keep is that letter that has the sticker and your number on it, because that, as you probably already found out, is how you get in. So make sure you keep that safe and bring it with you on March 29th. Okay? Any other questions?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, you can go with the deputy. All right, we're going to take our morning recess. We'll convene back here at 11:10. I note the Supreme Court asked for response to the PFR by today at 5 o'clock, so I don't know if the state needs, I assume that's being taken care of by those not in the courtroom. All right, thank you all. See you in 11:10.
And as they go on a break here, we have other live events to go to, everybody. This one just worked out perfectly here. You got the First Lady right here, just getting this feed in. Let's listen into some of this.
Yeah, are we listening to Paula? I'm flying in around, so we're doing that. This is got really. Over there for the light table, we're not going to be able to go see it, but children can actually build in light using these beautiful plastic pieces. And then if you want to come around here, I can show you this. So this is more looking at what happens when children are forced with water. So they have these fun tools they can put them with. Oh, I don't mind making what I just water. But again, so cool, right? So one of the things we really also want to do is make sure that we represent and so the next time there is again, Mr. So let's see. Down here. Is that right? 1 second.
I know my kids have good books going down the
All right, so we were just getting that feed in right there from Washington State, where the First Lady is. She is visiting military members really on this West Coast swing that she is on. She's going to be in Washington and California the next couple of days. She is meeting with military members and military families, and you can see we just have a really a roving camera here as they are just getting shots there of the First Lady. So what we'll do is we'll take another quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And for those of you that are still with us here, we appreciate that. We are now going to go to show you the full remarks made by House Republicans just a little bit ago.
We don't know either today or tomorrow. It's a real tragedy. When you look at that package, we know that the result of that package is going to be middle-class tax increases. We know for sure that it includes provisions that are not targeted, they're not temporary, they're not related to COVID, and it didn't have to be this way. We could have had a bill that was, a fraction of the cost of this one that could have gotten bipartisan approval and support, but the Speaker decided to go in another direction. And so we are going to be saddled with a burden, spending burden, and a tax burden that is really indefensible from the perspective of what it actually accomplishes. The other thing that we're focused on is what's going on at the border. And I watched this morning, I saw the White House Press Secretary, Jen Psaki, say that she was heartbroken by what's happening at the border. And to that I would say policy has consequences. When you say that you're not going to enforce our immigration laws, when you say that you're not going to build a border wall, it has consequences. And we're seeing the tragic consequences of that right now at the border. So we are going to be very focused as a conference on what's happening at the border, on working to make sure that as the Biden administration refuses to open schools, they have instead decided to open the border and to let in thousands of people potentially who have got COVID. You've got children at the border that have been separated again from their parents, and being heartbroken isn't a policy. So we expect to see action, and the American people expect to see action. Now with that, I'm going to turn things over to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson, who's going to talk about Second Amendment issues and some of the gun control bills that are on the floor this week.
Thank you very much. I'm Richard Hudson, North Carolina's 8th Congressional District. I'm also the conference secretary. Listen, I'm a father of a 5-year-old who's in school. I care deeply about gun violence, and I'm proud that the Republicans in Congress are very serious about ending gun violence. Unfortunately, the Democrats in Congress are not serious about ending gun violence. And it's obvious by the bills they're bringing to the floor this week, which would do nothing to have stopped a single mass shooting in this country, yet they threaten the rights of law-abiding citizens. The Republicans, when we were in the majority, passed meaningful legislation, including the Fix NICS Act, which would have stopped the church shooting in Texas, like the 21st Century Cures Act, which had the most meaningful mental health reform in a generation and dealt with communicating with parents of children in crisis. We also passed the Stop School Violence Act, which put $1 billion into hardening schools, into getting mental health resources to schools, and also into training of law enforcement. I actually have legislation I've introduced that will double the funding for the Stop School Violence Act. The Democrats have rushed 2 bills to the floor, no regular order, no hearing time. They have allowed no meaningful input from Republicans, and these bills, again, would have not stopped a single mass shooting. Not Newtown, not Charleston, not Parkland, not Las Vegas, not Sutherland Springs, would not have stopped the shooting of our former colleague Gabrielle Giffords because her shooter passed a background check. H.R. 8 fails to recognize the fact that every commercial gun sale in America requires a background check today. And H.R. 1446 creates delays for law-abiding citizens, could be indefinite, to acquire a weapon, and would not have closed the Charleston loophole. If you want to close the Charleston loophole, I direct you to Tom Rice's bill, H.R. 1518, which would, because the problem with the Charleston shooting was information sharing by law enforcement, and this bill allows that information sharing. Republicans have meaningful alternatives, and we have 6 bills that have been introduced last week and this week. We will be pushing to end gun violence. Our legislation will actually address this problem. The Democrats are concerned about taking away our Second Amendment rights, and the 2 bills this week will simply erode those rights. And so we're urging a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Now I'd like to introduce another member, the gentlelady from North Carolina, who's the Republican leader of the Education and Workforce Committee, Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Democrats will have you believe that their radical PRO Act protects the right to organize. All it does is protect the $1.6 billion that the labor unions donate to support left-wing organizations. While trying to garner support for this outrageous bill, I've heard Democrats argue that it's the unions that built the middle class. No, the unions didn't build the middle class. Entrepreneurs and individual workers in this country built the middle class. And what this bill does is take away their freedom, making unions bigger and the individual freedom smaller. There are too many harmful provisions to list in this bill, so I'll highlight some of the more egregious ones. It overturns 27 states' right-to-work laws. It eliminates employees' rights to a secret ballot, allows unions to boycott and picket nearly every business in America, whether they're subject to a union vote or not. The bill reinstates destructive Obama-era regulations, includes California's controversial AB 5 with 0 exemptions, which will deprive millions of Americans the opportunity to work independently and start their own businesses. This provision is particularly ill-advised since many Americans during COVID, like working parents, are taking advantage of the flexibility the independent contracting model offers. At a time when employers and workers are forced to tighten their purse strings, it's unconscionable that Democrats are pushing a bill that will take millions from workers' paychecks and employers. It also forces workers to hand over their private personal information to a union. AFL-CIO President Trumka testified last Congress that unions will be able to go after workers, quote, in the grocery store and at their homes. This is not the way America operates. This personal information could very well be shared with third parties, subjecting workers and their families to even more unwanted attention and harassment. The bill increases the risk of union corruption and wrongdoing. Federal investigators recently finished their investigation of the UAW, where senior union leaders embezzled workers' hard-earned union dues for personal expenses. Don't forget, federal law already protects employees' right to organize, and Republicans respect this right. Any reforms to the U.S. labor laws should help workers, not union bosses. Now's not the time to reward union bosses and liberal activists with political favors. Our focus should be on reopening schools and rebuilding the economy so all Americans have the opportunity to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. And now we have one of our new members from Iowa, Ashley Henson, who's going to talk about legislation she has to restore our schools, get schools back open again.
Good morning, everybody. Ashley Henson from Iowa's 1st District, and I come to you today as a working mom of 2 school-aged kids. We need to get our schools back open. When I look at the last year, it's been quite the year, and the toll we've faced, especially when it comes to our young people, is staggering. The mental health visits for our young people as young as 5 are increasing at a dramatic pace. They're ending up in our emergency rooms. When I look at why kids need to be in school, it's more than reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Thank you to our new viewers around the country and around the world. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thank you so much for joining us as News Now from Fox continues. It is now noon out on the East Coast, 9 a.m. out on the West Coast. We have a packed couple of hours here that we are going to be bringing you the news of the day. As these feeds continue to come into our newsroom, we will be highlighting all of the events that are happening in real time right here. This is a live look in Minneapolis where the jury selection, well, it's on a short break right now. They're in their morning break, but they will get going again in the Derek Chauvin trial. And of course, we will be featuring that for you a little bit in and out of that today as the jury's selection process does continue there in that trial in the death of George Floyd. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. We have the First Lady out in Washington State right now visiting military families and service members there. So we will bring you her remarks in a little bit here on News Now from Fox as she is talking to some of those military members right now. She's in Washington State, going to be in California tomorrow on a West Coast swing for our military members there. We're also keeping an eye out in the White House in the D.C. area because soon President Biden will have an event on going to a small business and seeing everything that is happening with the COVID-19 pandemic and the relief bill that is all in progress right now. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. But our first story that we want to bring to you, a very sad one out of Tampa, where an officer was killed in a wrong-way crash, and the chief there saying that he likely collided with this wrong-way driver on purpose to save others. Just a sad, sad moment there. A 16-year veteran with the force there, and hearts go out to the family and friends there of that fallen officer. Let's bring you that update here on News Now from Fox.
Between Hillsborough and Sly. Within minutes, our officers responded to the area and they found the crash site. The wrong-way driver was Joshua Daniel Montague from Golden, Colorado, was driving a rental car. We're still working through the speeds. Next of kin has been notified, but obviously there's a lot more information that we're gathering as to exactly where he got on. We believe he got on at Bush Boulevard, but we're still working through some of that. We're relying on what calls we've got to 911 and some witnesses. Police officer Jesse Madsen, 45 years old, 16 and a half years at the Tampa Police Department, a father of 3, he has 2 boys, age 16 and age 12, and a 10-year-old daughter. He earned our life-saving award 7 times during his career. We have reason to believe that he veered into this oncoming car to protect others. That is what we have gathered through some of our witnesses, some of our investigation. So when you look at someone who's earned 7 life-saving awards, it's no surprise that he would take such swift action and do this. Jesse Madsen, badge 507, is the 32nd police officer to die in the line of duty for the Tampa Police Department. The Tampa Police Department will go into a 7-day period of mourning, but I want everyone to know that they have my word that while we mourn the loss of one of our fallen officers, we will do everything within our abilities to keep you safe. Mayor?
This is a very difficult day for our entire community and specifically for the members of the Tampa Police Department. It's a very close-knit family, and when we lose an officer, it affects the entire community, but specifically the men and women in uniform that have dedicated their lives to serving our community. And as you heard, Officer Madsen has 7 life-saving awards in 16 and a half years. That's an incredible testament to his service to our community. And if what Chief Dugan has said that he actually took in the last seconds of his life, if he took steps to try to save others by laying down his life, that really is a true testament to the kind of individual that Jesse Madsen was. I just left his family, his wife and sons. His daughter was resting, but they clearly are devastated. They're very, very thankful for the thoughts and prayers of the entire community. You know, they're not sure the next steps to take, but again, we're a very tight-knit family, and we're going to do everything that we can to make this most difficult time as easy as it can be for them. We intend to light up the city of Tampa, City Hall, and all of our bridges in blue in honor of Officer Madsen and his service to our community. As you see behind us, we have the police memorial, and we have a service here every year. And a couple of the phrases that you hear over and over are lost but never forgotten. And also a plea that the last name etched on this memorial will be the last for eternity. And unfortunately, that's not the nature of law enforcement. These tragedies occur. And I am just thankful, as the community is, for those men and women that dedicate their lives, put their lives on the line to serve our community and to make Tampa one of the safest cities in the nation. So God bless Officer Madsen and his entire family and the Tampa Police Department.
Any questions?
Could you spell the name of that wrongly driver?
Sure. Joshua, Jushua, Joshua, and then Montague is Montague from Golden, Colorado.
And do you ever find any records on him, whether he had a criminal past?
That is still under investigation. You know, you have to. We had a lot of things going on last night, as you can imagine. It took us quite some time to get Officer Madsen out of the car and also open the other car where Mr. Montague was in. So there's a lot of moving parts to this investigation, and it's ongoing.
Was Officer Madsen directly responding?
Such a sad story there. That officer, a 16-year veteran of the force and a U.S. Marine veteran as well. His life cut way, way too short there. And that's a sad update there in Tampa, hearing from the chief as well as the mayor here. As we continue to roll on right here on News Now from Fox, let's go out to another live event right here. We are now going out to the Capitol, where they are doing a Zoom right now. This is a Zoom Rules Committee. This is the House Rules Committee meeting to prepare the Senate version of the coronavirus bill for a floor debate and a final vote on Wednesday. And this really comes on the heels of President Biden just tweeting out moments ago saying that the American people need direct economic relief and they need it now. So let's listen to some of this Rules Committee while we do wait for the Chauvin trial to get going again.
Between the budget resolution and the reconciliation bill itself, we have had more than 100 hours of debate in the House of Representatives, spanning Rules Committee hearings, committee markups, and multiple debates on the House floor, with another imminent. The Senate debated the resolution for nearly 15 hours and considered more than 800 amendments before taking more than 25 hours to pass the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 last week. Now it's back to us, where we will debate for a few more hours
and vote before sending the bill to President Biden's desk to be signed into law. We have been thorough. We have followed every House rule and proper procedure for a budget reconciliation bill. But we have also acted with the urgency the situation requires. But ultimately, this has been a race against the clock because we know the devastation that is happening in and to our communities every day. The American Rescue Plan is aggressive, no doubt about it. But researchers and health professionals have told us this is what is needed to scale up testing and tracing, to address PPE shortages, and to speed up equitable vaccine distribution so we can end this pandemic once and for all. Economic experts across the ideological spectrum support the American Rescue Plan. They agree that this targeted, evidence-based plan is needed, both for struggling families and for the American economy, and that the federal government has ample fiscal capacity to provide it. In fact, because of this legislation, economists estimate that we can bring the economy back to near full employment in a little over 12 months instead of 3 years as currently projected. But that's not all. We are providing direct financial relief to more than 80% of American families. We are lifting half of America's poor children out of poverty, and we are providing the resources schools need to open safely and to make up for lost time in the classroom. The American people get what we are doing. They know all too well the painful challenges facing our nation, and that is why the vast majority of them, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, support the American Rescue Plan. This is a momentous moment for this Congress, but more importantly for our nation and for American families. The American Rescue Plan will soon be signed into law, and help will be on the way. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity. Thank Ranking Member Cole. Let's be clear. The bailout we are discussing has little to do with COVID-19. So much of what is in this bailout is for the political class. It's not for the working class. Bailouts to states with no requirement, they end lockdowns. Billions to schools with no requirement, they open up for our kids. Obamacare expansions, a universal basic income, checks for prisoners.
All right, that Rules Committee just getting going right there, setting up the final COVID-19 relief vote expected tomorrow there. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I want to take you out to Minneapolis here. This is what we do when these live feeds keep coming back to us. We go to it right here on News Now from Fox. Going out to Minneapolis, the Derek Chauvin trial jury selection is now underway once again. Let's listen.
Hey, good morning. Come on up. Okay. You are juror number 3, correct?
Yes, I am.
All right, and we are going to just refer to you by your number. And so the first thing I'm going to do is swear you in, so make sure that all your questions are answered under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Now, we want to make sure that you speak right into the microphone so that we can hear your voice. And also, we tend to, in jury selection, get into kind of a conversational tone. And so you'll have a tendency to, like, interrupt the questions with affirmation, or to answer with, We can't really do that because our court reporter needs yes and no answers. And also, you cannot talk over each other. So it happens because, like I say, it becomes kind of a conversation. A normal conversation, we do interrupt each other, talk over each other. But let's try and avoid that if we can in this case. So you filled out a questionnaire. And the first question I have is there anything you wanted to add or modify? Because sometimes people fill out the questionnaire, and then in reflection, they realize there's something they probably should have put in there. Is there anything that comes to mind regarding that?
Not off the top of my head. It was a while ago, and I think I filled it out to the best of my ability at the time, and I don't know that that's changed.
Okay. If, while one of the attorneys is questioning you, you do have something that comes to mind, you'll feel free to offer that. Now, you're not supposed to read any articles, and you're supposed to avoid media about this case, and that's what it said in the questionnaire. Since the questionnaire has advised you to avoid any media coverage of this, have you inadvertently been exposed to any media? And by that I mean, it's not your fault if you see a headline or maybe somebody talks to you about it, says, "Oh, did you hear?" And is there anything like that that has happened since the questionnaire and now as you sit here in court?
A couple of headlines, and to be super specific, Instagram stories that have been shared or Instagram posts that have been shared, but they're all fairly high level, not anywhere near like the depth of an article.
Okay, do they talk at all about the substance of the case or the procedures or the participants, anything like that?
Not particularly. I've seen the charges that are being brought at a high level, no further than what their titles are, I suppose. And then
pretty much what I said today.
Yeah, exactly. And then additional information about kind of the timeline of the case. So when jury selection was beginning, when the actual proceedings are going to begin, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Do you think you can put all that aside? Because as you notice, we asked you, what have you read about or heard about the case? Because we recognize that people have heard about this case. The question becomes, can you decide the case only on what you hear in the courtroom?
So aside from what I've heard since my questionnaire, am I willing to put the headlines aside?
Everything you've heard before. Because you have to essentially be the blank slate, and it's okay to come in with some knowledge about the case. It's okay to even have opinions. It's even okay to have strong opinions about the case. But as a juror, you have to put all that aside. Some people will say, I can't do that. I've got these very strong opinions. I cannot put them aside. I cannot be, and very honestly, say they can't be fair and impartial. Some people, even with strong opinions, can say, I understand my role, and I feel I have the self-discipline to be able to do that, to put aside what I've heard before, decide just what we hear in court, and to follow the law, which obviously comes from the court. Do you think you could do that?
I definitely fall into the bucket of strong opinions.
Okay, and I noticed that on your questionnaire.
Yeah,
there were some.
Definitely have strong opinions about the case. I think I could try to be impartial. I don't know that I can promise impartiality just based on my opinions and personal experiences. I don't know that that could be promised.
Okay. And I appreciate that's a very honest answer. And we put you in a tough spot because we say, you know something about the case, but even what you know, we're asking you to put aside. And to some extent, can a bell be unrung? All those kind of concepts. And we put you in a tough spot and say, now tell us whether you could be fair and impartial. We recognize that that's a tough spot to put you in. But you know yourself better than any of us. Do you think when it comes right down to it, that you could do it?
I don't think so.
Okay. And tell me a little bit more about that.
I think in this case, there's very clear action that was taken. And I think regardless of what kind of dress you put the action in, it happened. And so regardless of what charges are brought or what evidence is brought, I think there's already too much that has happened and too much that is just cold, hard fact that cannot be ignored.
Okay. So let me put it one last way. As a juror, you can't be hoping or yearning for a certain result over another. And because if you are, either way, you shouldn't be a juror because that's not being impartial. And it's not a character flaw, it's just, based on what you've seen and heard. And that's
Understood.
So do you think that's still the case, that you probably...
I think I definitely hope for a specific outcome, and I don't know that that would change.
Okay. Any inquiry from the defense? Well, Well, let me just see if the defense or the state has any inquiry. You may.
Only as to this issue?
Only on this issue, please.
Morning.
Good morning.
Juror number 3. Would you agree that there are two sides to every story?
Yes.
And if you were called upon to be a juror in this case, you would have to decide and be able to promise the judge that whatever opinions that you may have formed, whatever you believe may be the case, you would have to put that aside and decide the case based solely on the facts that are before you. And that's just how the legal system works. Do you understand that?
Understood.
And oftentimes people come into this courtroom, they have disputes about what happened, and you can have some sort of preconceived notion about the way you think it ought to come out or what maybe actually happened. Would that be fair?
Yes.
But would you also agree that it's really not until you hear all of the evidence and see everything for your own eyes and have people put that into context for you that you really know and can make a decision one way or the other?
I think that's fair. I think at this point, it would be interesting to understand how the evidence is different than what has already been kind of played out in the news and media coverage of everything that's conspired since late May last year. I think it would definitely sound and feel different in a courtroom just based on different people giving you the evidence, different motivations, but I think a lot of it has already been exposed, if you will, and so hearing it a second time or in a different way.
We're going to take a quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox.
You would need to hear everything that happened before you could finally decide a case, though.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so when we talk about some of the media that you've been exposed to, I think you said that there's some Instagram stories that have been shared, right? Probably saw some things on the news.
Mm-hmm.
The video footage, correct? And when you're looking at these bites on the news, fair to say this happens in 30-second to 60-second increments?
Correct.
And I believe the judge instructed everyone that they could expect to anticipate this trial after it begins to last somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 weeks, right? And so if there's the ability to fill up 4 weeks with evidence, that's significantly longer than probably what you've been exposed to in the news. Would you agree?
I would agree.
And so just knowing that, knowing how much more is out there, how many more witnesses they are to hear from, how, all of the testimony that could comprise a case, would you at least acknowledge that, maybe you haven't heard everything to this point?
I would agree that I have not heard everything. Mm-hmm. However, are there repeated stories, I guess, from folks? Are things really that novel that people are saying? I guess I would not debate that, but be interested to see how kind of novel the hundreds of witnesses' recollections actually are, or if it'll just be kind of repetitive.
So there'd be two parts to the trial, right? There's what happened, and that would come from the witnesses who would testify, the evidence you would see. And then there's, well, what does it mean? And that would come from whatever the judge instructs you that it means, right? These are the elements of the different crimes charged, and you'd have to take a look at those and try to decide whether the facts that were presented fit these elements. And of all the coverage that you've heard, I'm assuming you've heard nothing in terms of what the law actually is. Fair?
That's fair. I guess I know the difference between, don't quiz me, but I know tentatively the difference between second degree and third degree murder.
Okay. I won't quiz you.
Okay, amazing.
All right, and I appreciate your candor here today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Juror number 3, I'm going to excuse you from this case, so you don't have to serve on it. I appreciate your candor and I don't want you to feel that you have not done your duty. Your duty was to tell us the truth and be candid. in this case. So we do appreciate everything, the work you put into the questionnaire and your willingness to answer questions today. So you can go with the deputy and we'll proceed at that. You'll have to leave the letter with the deputy once you leave with him. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Greg, grab him in the hallway and say, hold off a minute.
If you're just joining us here on News Now from Fox, the judge has dismissed the potential juror number 3 there, as she said that she would not be able to be impartial for the trial. So let's continue to listen in.
About their background. For example, there was one who was had a job title that person was easy to find on the internet, and if we talk about that in open court, I'd like it to be generalities to protect their anonymity. In fact, there might be a couple like that from what I've seen. So just to keep that in mind, about try and stay as general as possible to protect the anonymity of the jurors. With that, I think we can go to number 4. And remember, we're going to go until 12:30. 12:30 is when we're going to end.
And while we wait for the next juror there to be interviewed, we have President Biden in the D.C. area at a small business where he is checking that out. This is a small business that benefited from the Paycheck Protection Program loan. So let's listen to a little bit of the president here.
We've been in this building for 7 years now. Like my father was telling you, this is actually our second presidential visit, but our first one in this building. So welcome. We're excited to have you here today. And I want to introduce you to Mary Ackley from Little Wild Things. She has a separate business in our building. What they do is microgreens. I'll turn it over to Mary because she can describe her business a lot better than I'll be able to. Fire away.
Sure. We moved here a few years ago, and we are an urban vertical farm located right next door. We grow salad greens, microgreens, and edible flowers. Beautiful salads. We deliver them all over the greater Washington, D.C. area, both to homes, and we donate locally here in the neighborhood.
Now, you've been engaged in the neighborhood too. You sponsor Little League team, don't you?
We do. We sponsor a Little League team. We also we run job fairs for special needs programs to get their students to help them find employment. We've actually hired 3 people from that job program. It's called Project Search. It's a partnership between a nonprofit and the DC government, and they do a great job training their students who are special needs to come and be able to work in an environment like this and be great contributors.
Have you hired any of those folks?
We've hired 3.
3?
Yeah.
Good job.
And Mary participated in our first job fair. We were going to do another one, but obviously the pandemic has halted our ability to do that. But when things go back to normal, we're going to continue to do those job fairs.
Well, tell me, what kind of what hit you the hardest when the pandemic hit?
Right. So the biggest challenge is what we're going to do with our staff. You know, there were so many uncertainties related to what the virus actually did. The first thing that we did was we took all of our at-risk employees and we sent them home, and we paid them through that entire process. That first wave of PPP loans was very helpful to allow us to do that. Obviously, that was not cost effective, but we felt like we had to do that for our employees. You know, and we're still struggling because while our retail business has actually increased over the course of the pandemic. I think people know there's a little bit of a hardware boom. A big portion of our business is actually government sales and commercial sales. And for the first 4 or 5 months, I mean, that was completely gone. And that was honestly usually is about 60% of our annual revenue.
One of the reasons why I changed the rule for 20 days to make sure only employers who had 20 or fewer employees could qualify for PPE. And the reason for that was 400,000 small businesses went out of business.
Yeah.
They got in line, but they couldn't get the help. And we found out that an awful lot of that went to bigger businesses that, in fact, weren't supposed to qualify for this because they there used to be a thing called Inspector General to see where the money went. And the last administration fired the Inspector General, so a lot of the money went to people who shouldn't have gotten help, and it didn't go to folks who. But you know, with this new program, and we're going to continue this, by the way. It's not only you've been the only businesses with fewer than 20 folks could apply in the last couple of weeks, but now we're going to keep the focus on it because a lot of minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, are increased significantly by 20 and 15%, as well as getting people who, in fact, weren't able to get in line before. And it's hard to know how to get in line. And so I hope this is going to continue to increase because we're also at a point where I think we're going to begin to gain control of this virus.
Yeah, and we appreciate your leadership on that. One quick point I want to make is that I said we're the oldest hardware store in DC. I also say we're the greenest hardware store in America. We have 2 urban farms actually in our building. We have Mary, who's in the garage there, and then we have Cultivate the City, which is an awesome rooftop garden. They exist on our rooftop. But you're not going to be able to see it from here, but if they want to give a wave.
I see them.
Yeah. And then we also have
Don't
solar.
jump, we need you.
And then if I could just.
Moving out, press, let's go. Press, let's go, you guys. Come on, press. We're gonna move out. Let's go, press. Let's go. Come on, press. Let's go. Come on, let's go. Crisis at the border, sir. Let's go, you guys. Come on. Come on, let's go. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much.
All right, there you go. You hear the media being rushed out of there. No questions being taken there by President Biden. It is now 48 days and counting. We have not seen a formal news conference there from the president, so we will continue to wait for that. All right, let's take a quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox. When we come back, we will, of course, take it back out to Minnesota there, where the Derek Chauvin trial continues, their jury selection process underway. Let's take a quick 2-minute break.
Good afternoon, or I should say good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I am doing great. Thank you for asking. How about yourself?
I'm well, thank you. A little busy, but I'm well.
Likewise.
So here's what I'd like to do is I just kind of want to ask you some pretty general questions first, get to know you a little bit, and then I'm going to follow up with some questions about some of the answers you gave on your questionnaire. And I understand you haven't seen it or read it in a while. I'll refresh your recollection as we go through that, okay?
Yes, sir.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay. So let's assume, sir, that you and I met in some social circumstance, a party, whatever. What would be 2 or 3 things you would want me to know about you after I walked away?
Just, the good nature and just, pretty much I'd want you to know I'm a good person and just fun, outgoing, and I mean well.
Good.
Pretty much it,
Yeah, you seem like an outgoing guy. Do you have any particular interests, hobbies, things you do in your spare time?
I follow sports briefly. Really, work's been my main go-to. I was doing some kickboxing in Minneapolis for a little while, but lately work's been so hectic that I haven't done that. But other than that, no, not really. I haven't been the best at adapting to Minnesota yet.
I understand. Without divulging any personal information, as far as family members or names or anything, was there something particular that brought you here to Minnesota from Southern California?
To chase more opportunity. I was from a small town in Southern California, and Minnesota was referenced as a place where I could better my situation, so I came out here to chase the Minnesota dream of bettering my situation and making something of myself.
Okay, wonderful.
It's working so far.
Working so far.
So far,
All right.
so good.
Good. So you got a packet in the mail advising you that you were going to be coming in for jury service.
Yes, sir.
When you opened that packet, what was your just initial reaction? And whatever it is, just let us know.
It was a little bit of a kind of a shock, just moving here recently, like I was saying, wow, out of all the people, me, kind of wow, okay. So I just started glancing over it and stuff and just seeing, what I was getting myself into, I guess you could say.
Right. Well, obviously you learned that you were being summoned in a high-profile case.
I read that there was the potential of it, but I was the likelihood of me getting chosen for that, I didn't think it would be me, or I'd make it to this point.
Okay. But you got a questionnaire that you filled out, and it was obviously about this case.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And before you filled out that questionnaire, you were aware of what happened in the case?
Yes, I was aware of it.
Right. And I'm assuming that's from like media coverage?
Just the media coverage, what was going on in the media and what had taken place after that, kind of butterfly effect, you could say.
Sure. I just want to look at one thing here. Okay. So once you kind of read over that questionnaire and started, thinking about the possibility that you could be here today, what was your reaction? Did it change?
It changed a little bit. I think things got more serious for me. And then once I was filling it out to the best of my knowledge, I was just trying to be as unbiased as possible and just, give it direct, straightforward answers on how I feel or my experience with the questions that were asked in the documents.
Okay. All right. Can you think of a situation, whether it be in your personal life or your professional life, where you have been called upon to resolve a conflict between two people?
Like you were saying earlier with social activities, guys getting into it with each other and stuff, sometimes you just try to de-escalate it, break it up, or, just make sure it doesn't get to the point where, there's no going back, I guess you could say, or do something you might regret.
Sure. So let me expand on that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You would agree that not all disagreements necessarily become physical in their nature?
Not all disagreements do need to become physical, but in a situation where defense becomes your only way out, I do believe in self-defense.
Sure. I guess what I'm asking is, have you ever just simply, two friends are having an argument?
Yeah.
And it's not physical, it's, what's the best color, right?
Yeah,
whatever, right? Insert any mundane detail. And they're arguing about it, right?
Yes.
And they turn to you and they say, juror number 4, although they wouldn't call you juror number 4, they'd say, what do you think? How do we resolve this dispute between you? Can you think of a situation like that?
Well, I'd give them my personal opinion, and I guess if it's 3's the number, if it's a 2-to-1 deal, or if my opinion's different than theirs, then now all 3 of us are in disagreement.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, not every time you're going to come to a solid agreement in a situation.
All right. I'm going to come back to that in just a second here.
Yes, sir.
But how about a situation where you've got 2 friends that are describing, or 2 people or 2 acquaintances, and they're describing a certain situation. And person number 1 is saying, this is what happened. And person number 2 is saying, no, that's not what happened. This is what has happened. How do you determine which of those 2 people is telling the truth?
It would depend who could back up their rebuttal with facts.
Okay.
I stick to the facts, and if they could back that up with facts and proof, there's proof in the pudding, by all means, then their argument's going to be a lot stronger, in my opinion, than the guy who's just sticking to his opinion.
Okay. Do you think that there are certain things or certain, tools, so to speak, that you can apply to that analysis to determine if let's assume it's a situation where it's not on videotape, or it's not, there's no hard evidence, right? How do you resolve that dispute between 2 people? It gets more difficult, right?
It does get more difficult when there's no evidence and you're just kind of taking the good word of somebody. I guess character comes into play, and if you have any previous experience with that person, there's that old saying, a spade's a spade. If a guy's a liar, he lies 10 out of 10 times. He might just lie to you again.
Right.
And you'd be naive to think otherwise, I think.
Sure. And so let me just, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I get
No,
this is awkward, but
yeah.
So as I understand what you're saying is you have a dispute that you're trying to resolve. You're going to look first for, facts and evidence, right? And if those facts and evidence don't exist, you're going to kind of go on your experience and with the person's character.
With the person's character, and if it's quite obvious, the guy's telling me the sky's blue, it's a little bit more believable than a guy telling me, it's red or something,
Okay.
Or just, it just kind of all depends on the situation and the, scenario.
Right. So there are certain things that you can see for yourself.
Absolutely.
And you can make a determination based on that, right?
Yes, I have the ability to think for myself.
Right. Sky's blue.
Sky's blue.
Right. Okay. You understand that in this scenario, it's not a 2-to-1, it's not a 10-to-2, it's a unanimous decision that has to be made one way or another. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. And what if you found yourself in a situation where you were the odd man out? You were the only person, right, that disagreed with the rest of the group. How do you deal with that?
I stick to my guns, and just saying, I'm going to stick to what I believe is right,
Okay.
In my heart and what I feel, and that's what I'm going to go with.
Okay. And so, if you were in that situation, would you be willing to listen to what the other people are saying?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Would you be willing to re-examine your personal opinions?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I'm always open ears, and willing to, look at something again,
Okay.
It's like that saying, measure twice, cut once.
What if you have to measure 10 times?
Measure 10 times.
What about 100 times?
Measure 100 times. Get it right the first time.
Okay. Can you think of a situation, again, in your personal or professional life where you were just 100% convinced of something and then later it turns out you were wrong?
Mm-hmm. I think I could have a moment to just think.
Yeah, take your time.
I can't think of an exact moment, but there has been times in life where I've made a judgment and I was wrong, based on facts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's an honest answer. I appreciate it.
I mean that occurs in day-to-day life. Sometimes you're not always going to be right.
Right. Okay. And are you able to acknowledge when you're not right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, follow-ups on your questionnaire, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
All right. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit, and you referenced it in your an earlier answer you gave me too. You have some training in the martial arts, kickboxing?
Yes, sir. I've done a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've done some Muay Thai, some striking.
Okay. And how long have you practiced that?
I did it for about a year, mostly of the striking. Did some Jiu-Jitsu for about 2 months.
Okay. And did you achieve a certain level?
I was about one test away from getting my green sash. I was orange sash in Muay Thai. And then with the whole COVID thing that happened, when it took like full effect towards January or so, I became full-blown to working instead of attending the gym, and I just never went back to accomplish that.
Okay. Is it something you want to go back to?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good hobby, and I enjoy it.
Okay. So, reflecting back to an earlier question, the questionnaire asks you what you had heard or knew about the facts of this particular case. And something in your response struck me is you said the cop performed an illegal tactic with his knee across the neck.
Yes, in the video it looks like his knee is a little high. So with that being said, isn't the tactic supposed to be knee across like the shoulder blades?
So that's obviously one of the things that we're going to be discussing throughout the course of the trial, right?
Yes, sir.
So, but you used an interesting word in your response, which was an illegal move, right? What standard would you be applying in terms of the legality of a move?
Well, I guess the black and white fine print of, I guess, what they, to my knowledge, what would be in their, you know, well, I don't want to call it a handbook or their training.
Okay.
You know, from what I was just seeing in the news and stuff, and then just seeing, you know, the video from the angle that was showed on the news, it does look a little rough, in my opinion.
Okay, and that's, I appreciate your honesty, okay? So I guess my question is that you will hear evidence, if you are seated on this jury, you will hear evidence from people in the Minneapolis Police Department about their training and their train their officers. That may be different from your personal training.
Oh yeah, if I, you know, if they could educate me on what the fine print is in a situation like that, I'd be open ears to hearing that, and I would feel more educated myself, and that might change my opinion on what occurred that day.
Okay. So I want to make sure that what you would apply would be the Minneapolis Police Department's standards versus your personal experience being trained in jiu-jitsu. You would do that?
I would do that.
Okay.
Let's take a quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox.
You said in your response that it may change your opinion of what happened. It's fair to say you formed an opinion of what happened here in this case.
There is a little bit of opinion. I believe it could have been handled differently. I believe the outcome could have happened a lot more, you know, there could have been a different outcome in my opinion.
Okay. The questioner asks for your perspective on Mr. Chauvin, and you indicated it was a very negative opinion.
I would say what I've seen, yes, I formed I wouldn't say very negative, but I would say the way he handled that situation struck me as very negative.
Okay.
But like I said, if I'm, you know, more evidence and I'm educated more on the situation, I would feel better myself too about the opinion I'm creating of him, because I know nothing about this man.
Okay. Well, what you wrote in your questionnaire, and I understand I'm not trying to trick you, but what you wrote in what your questionnaire is that they took the law into their own hands.
Well, yeah, if a guy's, you know, sitting there telling you you can't breathe, and, you know, you decide, I mean, a man ultimately lost his life that day. And so earlier I was hearing that you have the right to, you know, a trial and stuff. He didn't make his, you know, court date.
Okay.
You know, his fate was decided on the street that day, unfortunately, due to either, you know, the certain circumstances. I'm not too sure of the evidence and everything, but, you know, ultimately his fate was decided that day.
So you formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of Mr. Chauvin at this point?
No.
Okay. And you're telling us that you're willing to examine all of the evidence in this case, right?
I think I'd feel a lot better about the whole situation if I was to examine more evidence and become more educated on the situation, because as of right now, I do have sort of a negative opinion on what happened that day. But like you said, you know, there's gonna be times in life where you are wrong, and some, you know, you face the music, and yeah, I'd be, you know.
So if after reviewing all of the evidence, you formed the opinion that what happened that day was not a crime, you could vote not guilty?
If the facts, the evidence show that what he did that day was proper policing, and there was other circumstances that caused that fatal incident, you know, and there's other things that tied into it, and that was the sole reason that that man lost his life on the street that day, and the evidence backs and supports it, I'd be willing to support what's right at the end of the day. But, you know, if it sways the other way, and the evidence shows that there was improper policing, and that was the sole reason that he didn't see his court date, you know, what's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong.
Okay. One of the questions in the questionnaire asks you about whether you believe that this incident has had a positive or negative effect on the community.
From what I've seen in the media coverage and talking to people who've lived here for many years, I wouldn't say true. The issue that happened had a very negative effect on the community itself. Some people might have had their own agendas tied to, you know, the whole movement that did occur, but it definitely didn't help with the community.
Okay. You also indicated that you have previously seen police engaged in activity that would be more force than needed. And you wrote, I have seen officers be very aggressive. They can be verbally abusive.
Yes.
Can you explain or tell us what you saw?
Well, I mean, even growing up as a younger kid, you know, I've seen officers, you know, get verbally aggressive and stuff, and just be a little bit more forceful than they should, you know. But that's not every officer, you know. At the end of the day, each individual is their own individual. But, you know.
Okay. So can you give me a specific example of what you've seen?
Well, I mean, when I was younger, you know, I've had some run-ins with cops, you know, and they weren't too nice to us, you know. They thought of us as punk teenagers, you know. So I've had a couple incidents, but that was in Southern California. But, you know, just a couple verbal exchanges and stuff, you know.
Okay. And do you have a general perception of police in general?
Well, I think there's good cops, and, you know, to say that there isn't bad cops, I mean, that would be a very, you know, I think there's good and bad, you know. There's some people who abuse their authority, and there's some people who, you know, use their authority for the better, and, you know.
Do you have an opinion of the Minneapolis Police Department specifically?
No, not really. I've never dealt with them, so no, not really.
So none of these previous experiences involve the Minneapolis Police Department?
No, sir.
There were some questions about your overall views on the system and how the system treats people. Do you recall generally those questions?
Not necessarily, I don't recall, but I know that the system is flawed, in my opinion, you know.
Explain why you think that?
Well, I think, you know, sometimes the punishment doesn't fit the crime, and sometimes, you know, I just feel like it's a broken system, you know. When prisons went private, they became their own private, you know, entity and stuff, and they started profiting off people being incarcerated. I believe it, you know, broke the system a little bit.
Your Honor, could we have a brief sidebar about something unrelated?
We're going to take a quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox.
We approach the bench now by doing it over
Okay.
wireless, so.
Understandable, I'm new to the whole process.
We're new to this kind of COVID process ourselves.
If I make this count.
You may.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly, one last question. Are you familiar with or the Northside Boxing Gym?
No, sir, I've never partaked in the Northside Boxing Gym.
Okay. Your Honor, I have no further questions, but I am exercising a peremptory.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, let me make a record. Oh, all right, hold on.
All right, well, the defense team goes into sidebar with the judge. We're going to move away from this just for a moment. We'll get back out to the trial. I do want to go back out to the House Rules Committee where they continue to talk about prepping for the final vote there of the COVID-19 relief bill coming up tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, I would start off by associating my remarks, of course, with Ranking Member Tom Cole, with Ranking Member Jason Smith. I would associate my remarks with Dr. Burgess, but he was so bold as to predict the vote tally from this committee, and that's just a bridge too far for me. So, but on a serious note, Mr. Chairman, I think the most insidious part of this bill is that the economy is already improving. And the reason the economy is improving is really twofold. One, thanks to Operation Warp Speed, thanks to the prowess of the American pharmaceutical industry, we have 3 vaccines that are incredibly effective. And that, of course, is allowing states to reopen, which is the second reason why the economy is bouncing back, is because we're pushing back on these draconian lockdown orders, orders that hurt small businesses, that infringe on personal liberties and freedom. And if you just take that one step further, the far left will then use this spending bill to credit the economic comeback that's already occurring. They'll use this bill to then justify more government spending in a cycle. And what I'm really afraid of in the future is that academia will use this bill, will falsely cite this bill as something that's helping the economy, which again was already improving, and they'll use it to again push Keynesian economic theory more. Now, just to get back to economics, Ranking Member Cole had mentioned a few economists that are against this bill, and they're all liberal. But just to put it in context, what we're talking about, Larry Summers was the director of the director of the National Economic Council for President Obama. Clearly not a conservative, and he's against this. He thinks it's going to do economic damage. Steve Ratner, he was an Obama advisor. He's also against this. He thinks it's going to do damage. And then, of course, Stephen Pearlstein, who is with the Washington Post, not exactly the most conservative newspaper out there, all against it. So it's not like this has unification on even the left. We're thinking this is going to help. But with that said, Ranking Member Smith, I want to just hit upon what was discussed with the ratios. From my understanding, not the ratios, the formulas were changed. Can you speak to that just briefly between the red state, blue state benefit? And additionally, if you could maybe mention the fact that in Ways and Means, it's my understanding that Representative Carol Miller had a formula that she put forth that was tied to childhood poverty rates, and how that may have helped get more support from the Republican side. With that, Mr. Smith, I yield to you.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. The formula that was changed, it was different than what was used in the prior bipartisan COVID packages. And by the simple formula changed, that used to just be based on population, that was the old formula change. This one was population and unemployment, you saw by just looking at the numbers, the two states with the biggest gains was California had the largest gain. And all I'm saying is that from the old formula to this formula, by that formula change, the state of California will get an additional $5.4 billion. I'm not talking about what they already will get based on their population. I know there was some prior discussion about, well, a state that's 6 times your population, Missouri, it should get more. Well, yeah, that's the case. However, this formula changes it for other factors that would, in addition to population, would give them $5.4 billion more. The number 2 winner in the whole process is the state of New York. That would gain 2.1, which the biggest losers happens to be like Florida, Virginia, South Carolina, Alabama, Indiana, Ohio. Missouri loses $820 million off the change. Iowa, Utah, North Carolina, Nebraska, Kansas. You see a common similarity that it's the majority concentrated from states that conservatives have been running their government. So it's just facts that I'm just pointing out. That why didn't we stay with the old formula? It worked fine on the last one. Why change it this time?
And what about the formula Representative Carol Miller put forward? I know that's not your committee, but could you speak to that at all, where you would link the formula to childhood poverty rates?
Yeah, I mean, if you're...
All right, once again, guys, just want to say thanks for being here with us on News Now from Fox. Christy Larson here at the desk with you. We've been keeping our eye on that event where they have been talking about the logistics of this final COVID relief bill. Of course, we're going to be popping in and out of that here throughout the day for you, as it is one of the biggest stories today. Also coming up here in the next hour, we are expected to hear from Texas Governor Abbott as he is down at the border wall. This, along with when there's a lot of heat for President Biden with immigrants crossing the border. So we'll be jumping down into Texas when we do see that live event happening. But of course, the top story of the day continues to be the trial out in Minneapolis. We've been covering here all morning long on News Now from Fox. So we're going to jump back into it. As I see, we do have more on our juror selection, again, with the Derek Chauvin trial in Minneapolis.
I understand that the motion from the court has been denied, but I do persist in the challenge.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, first and foremost, the law requires me to state a race-neutral reason for striking this particular juror. I disagree that the juror did not articulate strongly held opinions. He specifically referenced in his questionnaire illegality of certain moves, certain tactics. He stated that he had formed the opinion that these officers had taken the law into their own hands, and that he had formed opinions about what had happened. Yes, this juror indicated that he was willing to re-examine those opinions, but only upon essentially providing him evidence and proof contrary to his opinions, is the way I understood him to say that. I think the difference between this particular juror and the prior juror is that the prior juror had not watched the video. He had limited his intentional exposure. He came at it from a very analytical perspective in terms of science and things of that nature. He had no preconceived opinions whatsoever. That's a significant difference between these jurors. The second reason, Your Honor, is that this juror has a specific training, and I was concerned in part that his training or his belief that in martial arts training that this was an illegal move was concerning, and it struck me as insincere. His statements that he would be willing to re-examine the evidence struck me as insincere.
As far as the Batson factors, the fact that these are 2 Hispanic jurors who were struck, I think, establishes at least a prima facie case to go forward. But at the same time, the defense has provided a race-neutral reason for its strike. I disagree with the state. These 2 jurors, number 4 and number 2, are not the same in how they approached. I think Mr. Nelson established how juror number 2 was much more scientific, more not involved in the case. I'll be honest, at one point in his, in the voir dire, I realized the defense would probably strike him. That reason was not because of his race, but because when he was talking about his jiu-jitsu experience and his experience with the hold, is that he obviously might stick to his own opinions about being essentially an expert in the jury room, but more importantly, he stated it in a way that made it clear that he was going to stick to his opinion until somebody else told him otherwise or provided proof otherwise, which essentially is shifting the burden onto the defense and not coming in with the presumption of innocence. And so as soon as he stated in that terms that this was improper policing, this is my opinion, but if you can tell me otherwise, that's not the presumption of innocence. That's holding on to an opinion. And so it may not be for cause, but I think it is appropriate and a race-neutral reason for striking the juror. So anything further to add to the record from the state or from the defense?
Your Honor, respecting the court's ruling, I would just simply caution that in terms of strikes for specialized knowledge, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically, that will result in striking a disproportionate number of Hispanic people who would be more inclined to train in that particular discipline than other types of martial arts.
It's not that, and I didn't say that. It's not specifically that he has jiu-jitsu training. It's whether or not he would be the expert and whether he has an opinion that he is not willing to put aside. What I heard him say is he has the opinion, he's going to carry it into the courtroom, and you have to essentially convince him otherwise. That's not the presumption of innocence. That's not putting aside your opinion and your training. If he had come in and said, yeah, I know this is one thing, but I'm willing to listen to what the evidence is and decide on the evidence, not on what my personal opinion is. I think it's a fine distinction, but an important one. So accordingly, I'm not sure that's even true, but I'll accept your word that such training would impact people of Hispanic background. So that's a new fact for me.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I
understand the court's ruling.
All right, let's do our next juror, please. Number 5. Or what number is it? 8. 8.
And just a reminder, you are watching this live on NewsNOW from Fox. They are going to continue to question and challenge potential jurors until they can seat a 12-person jury, and they will have also 4 alternates. And while we wait for the next juror to make their way in to be questioned, we are going to go into a quick 2-minute break for some of you.
Have a seat.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And we are afternoon now. You are juror number 8, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, and if you can make sure you're right close to the microphone, that'd be appreciated.
Okay.
First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to swear you in to make sure that all our answers are under oath. So you can raise your right hand.
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. A couple things. You filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Now that you've had a chance maybe to reflect on something, is there anything that, well, first of all, was everything true on the questionnaire?
Yes.
Is there anything that you wanted to add or modify? Because sometimes when you reflect on what you put in there, you might think, I probably should have mentioned this or something, or maybe changed an answer here, and that's just fine because that's just the way, the dynamic of writing something up and then thinking about it some more. Is there anything like that you can think of on the questionnaire?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Now, the questionnaire advised that you weren't supposed to read any articles. You have some knowledge of the case from the media before you got your summons, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. And you've listed that in your questionnaire. Since you've gotten the questionnaire which advised you to avoid media, have you had any occasion to be exposed to anything about this case? Specifically, maybe you saw a headline inadvertently, or somebody said, oh, did you know something about this case? And essentially, despite your best efforts, you were exposed to between the questionnaire and now as you sit here.
Yes.
Okay, and what was that?
Well, it would be some of the news that I've watched. Also, there will be something in regard to that on the news.
Okay, and what substantively did you remember hearing or seeing about the case?
Really, it wasn't too much substance. It was more that the trial was going to be coming up and this and that, and I don't recall anything substantial.
Okay, so anything about the process or the lawyers or the parties, anything that you learned about?
No.
Okay. No. Now, you've got to decide this case, if you are a juror, only on what you hear in the courtroom. You understand that? Do you think you could do that? Because you've got, as most people do now, they come in here having some knowledge about the case. And the question is, do you have some knowledge about the case? It's, have you formed certain opinions that you cannot put aside because of the case? Or certain facts you can ignore. You have to put everything outside and just decide on with the evidence you hear, according to the law that I give you. Mm-hmm. Do you think you could do that?
Yes.
All right. The lawyers will probably follow up on that as well. You were given a long list of witnesses who might testify in this trial. Did you recognize any witnesses on the list?
No.
All right. And as far as the length of trial, any concerns there?
No.
Okay. Basically, it comes down to one of the questions we ask, which is, can you put everything aside and decide this case in a fair and impartial manner? And I think you said your answer was yes. Is that still true?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson then for further inquiry. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, juror number 8.
Good afternoon.
My name is Eric Nelson again. I'm just going to ask you a few questions. If there's anything I ask you that you don't understand or ask me to repeat, please let me know.
Okay.
And also, just as a reminder, we do need to use words as opposed to verbal or nonverbal nods, shakes of the head, things of that nature. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. First of all, I'm just going to ask you a series of questions in terms of yourself, get to know you a little bit better, and then I'm going to follow up on some of your questions in the questionnaire.
You can also take off your mask.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't feel that was my prerogative to tell. So my first question for you is, if you and I were to meet under different circumstances, what is a couple of things about yourself that you would want me to walk away knowing about you?
Well, I think that it'd be that I'm kind. I think that I'm fair. I'm a family man. I'm a Christian.
Okay. You received a jury duty notice in the mail?
Yes.
And when you first opened that notice, what was your initial reaction?
I've never been called for jury duty before, so I thought, well, this is my time. So, I've known people that have served on jury duty, and typically it's like a 2-week process. So I thought, okay, well, that's it's my time to serve on jury duty.
Okay. When you learned that it was in connection with this case, did that change your perspective?
A little bit. Just my feeling was that it was going to be most likely longer than a 2-week period.
You note in your questionnaire that you have some concerns about safety and things of that nature.